Hi everyone! Welcome back to my channel. I'm Laura, and in today's video we're going to do a deeper dive on the PM role. As I learn and grow as being a PM, I definitely want to come back and share with you all because I know that the PM space is pretty full of question marks for you outside of PM and that there are a lot of people interested in getting into PM. So this is one of many PM videos that you'll start to see, and if you want to check out more day-to-day activities, you can check out my vlogs about a day in the life as a PM, and that'll give you some insight into what my workday looks like. But today, let's stick to the basics and breaking down the different types of roles that you can find yourself being a PM in, as well as some of the shared tasks that you'll commonly find being a PM no matter what. This video is not sponsored, but I did want to share that I do now have an affiliate link with the company Exponent. They have resources on tons of topics like engineering management, product management, program management, and more. And they also have a community of people going through interviewing at the same time, so you get a lot of resources all in one. I personally used Exponent when I was prepping for interviews last year, and I personally found that example mock interviews provided by Exponent were really helpful because they were both informative and they also had great interviewees on that helped to explain how to break down a problem exactly. I'd recommend you first glance at the YouTube channel because they have lots of free resources there, but if you do want a more in-depth guide, then you can sign up for Exponent using the affiliate link in my description box down below, and you'll get access to tons of in-depth guides for each major tech company under the sun. I think that Exponent is a great resource, and it'll also give you some guidance on the whole PM space and what to expect in the interview process. So let's dive into the PM acronym and the different types of PMs that follow. So commonly when you hear PM, it's an abbreviation for the term product manager, but at Microsoft and many other companies, it can also be just a program manager, which is a pretty lofty and holistic role. Just taking my experience, we'll use PM to mean program manager, and we can break that down into three different types of being a PM. So the first type of PM is going to be a product PM, the second type is going to be an operations PM, and the third type is going to be a service/consulting PM. Your primary job is to own usually a set of features on a larger product, or if you're working at a smaller company like a startup, then you might even own the whole product and its end-to-end experience. At a larger company though, like Microsoft, you'll commonly see tons and tons of PMs on the same product, just working on very minute details of that product. Because as you'll quickly find out, interfacing with different engineering teams can be difficult to manage, as well as just controlling the end-to-end experience for a large product is probably pretty difficult. As a new product PM, you'll probably start out with just one or two smaller features of your product, and over time, as you gain experience and seniority, you'll gain to have more control over those features and also just be working on a larger, important, or more impactful feature. I'll quickly highlight some of your important day-to-day tasks that might be thrown into your calendar. This can include product stakeholder meetings, so people who actually are investing in your product or people who care a lot about the livelihood of your product. User and customer interviews, so people who are actually using your product. What are they experiencing? What are their pain points? And how can you help solve them from the engineering perspective? You'll also commonly be meeting with the engineering team, so you can either be participating in stand-up and asking for just general progress updates, or you can be on a sprint retrospective or a sprint meeting where you have to talk about some features that might get cut or reprioritized for the upcoming sprint or two. Another important part is also using data and gathering data in order to make informed decisions. And I'll touch on this more as kind of a unified day-to-day task as well, but specifically when it comes to product PMs, these decisions are important because they can determine if a feature gets put in or not and how users are actually using a feature. You can also be triaging or filing bugs for your engineers to fix, because any good product PM is also using their product and figuring out what kind of the user lifecycle looks like or what some of the common features and pain points that users are experiencing, as well as how to reproduce any bugs that might be popping up. You can also be working with the UX team because you can also very much so be working with the UX team because the UX UI of a product is also very important to the user experience, obviously, and the UX UI team can also be a great resource for running research on your behalf. So like I mentioned earlier with informed decisions and gathering data, part of this is running those tests to actually get that data in the first place. So you can be running A/B tests to test out features and positions of those features, or you can also be running investigations into how daily active users dropped 10% in the last month. As a product PM though, you can be working on either an external or internal product, and it doesn't really change too much of your day-to-day, it just suggests who you're making your tool for. Second is going to be an operations PM. Your primary goal is to maintain systems and infrastructures for all of your business partners, and as the name kind of sounds, you'll primarily be an internal-facing team. Working as an operations PM is the most flexible in my mind because there are a lot of different systems in place, and your job or role could be vastly different from one system to another, and each system will have obviously very different aspects than another system. So it's hard for me to speak in specifics about what this role can look like, but in general, your day-to-day tasks can also be pretty similar. You'll probably be involved in partner stakeholder meetings where these partners are the ones that are relying upon your system or infrastructure. You can also be answering tickets on behalf of your partners in case they're encountering troubles with the systems or encountering bugs. And as mentioned by a Redditor about operations PMs, you can also be working on process improvement, so improving the quality or efficacy of a certain process or streamlining it further. Quality assurance, so in general, just testing out a system and making sure that everything in that system is going great. Or you can also be working on technology backups or systems redundancy, so just making sure that in case of some horrible thing, that none of your systems are going to go underwater. Third is going to be a service or consulting focused PM role. Your primary goal as a service-oriented PM is really just to support your business partner needs, and if your team has a specific niche, then provide that niche for them. Being a service or consulting team is also going to be primarily internally focused, since you're trying to support the business needs of your other teams. This can turn into a lot of ad hoc or one-off requests because as a service-oriented team, you're supposed to provide services for people as needed. You can kind of think of this as being software as a service, except for not being software, just people and service as a service. So whatever niche your team does, you do that as a service. For example, your team can fall into a niche of collecting telemetry and analyzing telemetry, data manipulation or visualization, and reporting. As with many other things, I'm sure that there are tons of different niches that I'm forgetting, so if you do know, then please drop them in the comments down below to help out some other people. Lastly, in a service or consulting role, your day-to-day tasks will again follow kind of the same structure. You can engage in partner stakeholder meetings where you're talking to partners to figure out what their requests are and how you can help them. You can be engaging with user interviews, so seeing how your current users are engaging with a service that you may have provided them with. And of course, you'll be working on whatever your team provides as a service. Beyond that, you can also be working on a lot of documentation and improving processes as well as a service team, just because obviously there's a process to get work requested, and there's also a life cycle behind each of these items that are being provided. So there is also going to be a lot of work on the back end for your team of defining what that life cycle looks like, how you can improve that process. Now let's take a step back and talk about what all PMs are responsible for and the kinds of skills that you need. So beyond the 3 roles of PMs that I've mentioned, every PM is going to share a common skill set to some extent. Fundamentally, the role of the PM drills down to providing clarity. You're working with some sort of partner, stakeholder, or user, and you want to give that partner, stakeholder, user the best experience possible, and also make sure that the voices are heard and that you can provide them answers to any questions that they might have. For a product PM, obviously you'll have For a product team, obviously you'll have external stakeholders that are investing in your product, but it's also very much so the engineers and users that you're also interfacing with that you need to also provide clarity for. For service and operations PMs, then that'll primarily be the business partners that you're working with, as well as maybe your leadership that you want to. The next thing is that PMs are also very responsible for asking why and really drilling down to the base of why a decision is being made or why a particular question is being proposed. You might have heard of this in the sense of asking the 4 W's and how, which is who, what, when, where, why. Oh, that's 5 W's. The 5 W's and the 1 how. But I've also heard it as being asking 5 layers of why. So you might be faced with a situation, and so you ask, well, why are we doing X? Someone will respond, and then you say, okay, why are we doing Y? And you see how this kind of drills down into getting at the base of why a situation is the way it is, or why you're being pressed to make a decision on a particular topic. Another major part of every PM's life is writing documentation or just some other sort of specification. So a one-pager is not actually a one-page document as much as you may or may not want it to be, but it's basically become lingo for just a short document used to describe or sell some sort of feature, product, service, etc., and also explaining why it's necessary and some of the use cases behind that service, product, or feature. As is commonly expressed by many PMs, your day will also often be taken up by meetings, whether you like it or not. Like I mentioned, every PM deals with stakeholders, and with stakeholders comes meetings to drive explanations, create that clarity, and providing answers to anyone who may be asking. A lot of PMs also work closely on building their network and establishing good work relationships. So a lot of their time can also be spent just catching up in one-on-ones, asking what other people are working on, and getting kind of feedback from other people about what they could be doing or how they could be helping each other. Another thing that all PMs will probably have in common though is that you interface with the engineering team in some sort of way. Some engineering team is responsible for giving you the data that you use, or the engineering team is responsible for building the product that you're working on. It'll all be connected in some way, shape, or form. Now, the last thing I want to harp on here is that you'll probably hear the phrase data-driven a lot when you step into the PM space, because being a data-driven PM is everything, and that's how you kind of make good decisions in the tech space. Or good decisions anywhere, is really having that data. So you should quickly learn how to become data-driven, and that can look very different depending on your role. Many products will collect telemetry, for example, and telemetry is just a basic outline of how users are using your product. A good data-driven PM might dive into the telemetry, see what features people are using and not using, and conduct some sort of testing to figure out if we need to update a feature or if we need to update the overall experience because the feature is just being hard to find in the first place. For a service and operations team though, your data can look very different. For example, it could be looking and diving into financial data to see how you can be saving your internal partners some time and money as well. I would just recommend you to seek out perspectives from other people about how they've become data-driven and see if you can kind of emulate those practices and move towards being data-driven yourself. The last overall chapter here is talking about moving between these different types of PM roles. People like to switch up roles, and as you might be able to tell, being a PM in each of these different spaces, from product to operations to services, have those same fundamental skill sets, but you'll be learning something fundamentally different on top of that skill set in each role as well. The overall guidance that I've heard in terms of role switching is learn as much as possible in your current role. Once you feel like you're soft learning or you're kind of seeing a ceiling coming up, then it's probably time to switch roles and find something new and fresh for you. And here you have two options. You can move to a new team or you can move to a new company, and your choice is really up to you. If you can find something great internally, then by all means do it. I know a lot of companies have great internal postings, and there's a lot of flexibility for you to move around once you're at that company. However, if just the overall company isn't really doing it for you or you're at a smaller company, then switching companies can also be a great opportunity for you. If you've just joined a new team and it's not the product or operations or service teams you've ever dreamed of, and you want to jump to one of the other ones, consider this. Maybe you don't have an engineering team that you're in constant contact with and managing a feature or product for them. You still can build those skills of iteration within a project or evangelizing a product, for example. I'm sure that your team has some sort of product, and you can even think of the service that your team is providing as a product in and of itself. You can always bring up ideas though and drive them into fruition, especially if you think that they have great business value and that you're confident in the idea and you can sell it to your manager or leadership. All right, so that was a quick briefer into the different types of roles that you might experience being a catch-all PM. The team that you'll be on will probably fall into one of these three, and chances are if your title is to actually be a product manager, then you'll probably fall into the product engineering team space. If you have any other questions, please leave them in the comments down below and I'll do my best to answer. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you again next week for a brand new video. Bye.